When things don't sound the way they should, it can ruin the experience of playing. Don't worry, Cuthbert. The Dreamiverse contains heaps of ready-made sounds for us to use. First, let's switch over to play mode and see how it all sounds at the moment. Quiet, isn't it? Doesn't feel quite right. In fact, it's creeping me out, so let's head back into edit mode. Switch over to sound mode so we can start adding some sounds. Find the modes menu. It's inside the assembly menu. As you can see, there are lots of different modes. Each has its own set of tools for doing different things. We're currently in assembly mode. If you select the speaker symbol icon with X, we'll switch to sound mode. That's better. In the next step, we'll start adding sounds to the scene. Okay, the first thing we need to do is to start adding some background sounds. See the button with the magnifying glass in the sound menu? That's the search menu. Select it now to view the different types of sounds you can add. Now select the speaker button to search for sound effects. This is the Dreamiverse, where you can find all the wonderful stuff other dreamers have made. I've already set aside a collection of sound effects for you in here. That's what this collection is. It's bursting with different sound effects for you to play with. Select it with X to open it. I've arranged the sound effects into groups for you. To get a proper overview, use the right stick to zoom in and out of the collection. This group of sound effects are background sounds. You can hear a preview of each sound by hovering over them with your imp. Find something that fits the dreamy atmosphere of the scene. I rather like dream space. When you've found a sound you like, select it with X. The sound you selected now appears as a gadget on your imp. You can stamp it into your scene with R2, any place you like. It doesn't matter where you put it because background sounds can be heard everywhere in a scene. Now let's start time with R3 and see how it all sounds. Ah, that's better. Notice how much more alive the scene feels with just that one sound. Imagine how it will feel with even more sound effects. But there's no need to imagine it. You can start adding more now to create a layered and unique ambience. If you want to replace a sound effect, just stamp a different one over it. When you've got things sounding just how you want them, rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. Unique ambience. more sound effects. But there's no need to imagine it. You can start adding more now to create a layered and unique ambience. If you want to replace a sound effect, just stamp a different one over it. When you've got things sounding just how you want them, rewind time with L3 and move on to the next step. Background sounds really help to create an immersive atmosphere. But to add sound to a specific object in the scene, you need to use what we call a spot sound. Let's try it out on the fire between the platforms. I'm sure we can find some fire sound effects in the collection. Let's take a look. Select Search Sound Effects from the sound pane. As we open the tutorial collection in the last step, it's still open when we come back to the Dreamiverse. Isn't that handy? Ah, just what we need, some fire sound effects. Have a listen to some of the fire sounds and pick one you like. Once you've selected it, your imp will be equipped with a spot sound effect. See those rings coming off the gadget? That's the sound's fade zone. The rings show you how the sound fades away as you move further from the source. Let's stamp that sound between the first two platforms. Put it above the fire and see what that sounds like. If you want to see the sound's fade zone, select the gadget with X. Click R3 to listen to the sound effect. You'll notice the sound gets louder the closer you get to it. Aha! You can almost feel that fire. Toasty. As you move away, out of the fade zone, it gets quieter, until eventually you can't hear it at all. You can press the circle button now to deselect the sound effect. Then click L3 to rewind the scene. If you're happy with your spot sound, move on to the next step. Things haven't been that tricky for Connie so far, but the next gap looks a bit too big, even with her mighty jumping skills. Let's fly over to that floating platform using the left and right sticks and get a closer look at it. Looks like there's a trigger zone attached to it. Why don't we switch over to play mode and see what it does? Well, will you look at that? It lights up the platform when Connie steps on it. Lovely. You know what would make it even better though? If it made a sound as well. So let's switch back to edit mode and make that happen. I've got a feeling you can find something in the tutorial collection to use here. Go to the assembly menu and go back into sound mode. Now go to search and select search sound effects. Over here are some energy sound effects. Have a listen to a few. Pick a sound effect for your light up platform. I quite like the sound of Dream Terminal. See which one you like and select it with X. Now it's time to stamp it in the scene somewhere near the platform. In the next step, I'll show you how to trigger the sound effect. As we've already seen, background and spot sounds will play constantly when placed in the scene, like this. But for the platform, we want the sound to be triggered by Connie. And for that to happen, we need to connect the sound effect to the same trigger zone that activates the glow. Move in closer to the platform using the left and right sticks. Take a good look at the trigger zone gadget. Do you see the output port that says detected when you hover over it? That means it will trigger when... Oh, I just realized something. We got so caught up with these sound effects, we forgot to add another platform for Connie. She must be getting impatient, so let's sort that out for her. The easiest thing to do would be to clone the platform. Remember how to do that? Just hover over it, hold L1, and press and hold R2. Once the clone has been created, let go of L1, move it to the right spot, then release R2 to place it down. When you clone an object, any gadgets attached to it will come along for the ride. So all you need to do now is to wire the trigger zone on the second platform to the sound effect. Or even better, grab a new sound effect from the collection, just for variety. It's up to you. Dream shapers should always go with their instincts. Whatever you choose to do, move on to the next step when you're ready. All right. There's just one more gap for Connie to cross before she reaches the door. That pink cylinder would make a great stepping stone for her, but it's all the way down in the water. If you take a closer look at it, you'll see there's a trigger zone and a movement sensor on it. They're not connected to anything right now. There's also a keyframe on the platform. I wonder what that does. Try selecting it with X to find out. Just as I thought. It raises the cylinder, so Connie can use it to cross over. Press the circle button to deselect the keyframe. Looks like all we need to do is connect the cylinder's trigger zone to the keyframe, so it moves up when she gets close. And while we're doing that, why not add a sound effect to it as well? Let's jump back into the sound effects collection and see if there's anything appropriate in there. Down here, we've got some mechanical sound effect loops. These are the perfect sound effects for any sort of machinery in the scene. We want something that would go well with a raising platform. I think I'll go for the heavy metal ratchet loop. That sounds good, right? Okay, now select the sound effect of your choice and stamp it near the pink cylinder with R2 or X. In the next step, I'll show you how to connect all of the gadgets. Now select the sound effect of your choice and stamp it near the pink cylinder with R2 or X. In the next step, I'll show you how to connect all of the gadgets. Now we just need to do a little bit of wiring to get everything working. Remember, the trigger zone will activate when it detects Connie, triggering the keyframe to raise the platform. Grab the detected output from the trigger zone with R2 or X. Then stretch the wire to the keyframe gadget and connect it to its power port with R2 or X. The object it's attached to is moving. So when the platform starts rising, the movement sensor will send a signal from its output port. That's the output port on the right side of the movement sensor gadget. It's called velocity overall. Press R2 or X over the port to create a wire. You'll need to connect the other end of the wire to the sound effects power port. So much better. That sound effect really makes a big difference. There's even more you can do to bring this scene to life. See if you can add some sounds to the water between the platforms. I think there might be some water sounds in the tutorial. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the grid snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the assembly menu and open the guides section. Now that grid snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it. That means that forces in the much of an adventure if Connie could gone and switched on the movable. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the string button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it. Connects the line. to unequipped. It looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that. So let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the Connectors section in the Assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared. 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial. Connie's hosting a talent contest to find the best characters in the Dreamiverse. But she's a no-nonsense judge, and none of these candidates are up to scratch. Of course, Cuthbert's no use, So let's see if we can come up with something to impress her. Head into the dressing room, also known as edit mode, to get started. In this tutorial, we'll be customizing the appearance of a puppet. So we'll need a blank canvas to start. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Gadgets menu. Now open the Gameplay Gear menu. In here, find the Blank Puppet Deluxe. The deluxe version is the perfect starting point for making characters. Select it with X and a blue mannequin will appear on your imp. It has built-in features like jump and possession animations, which the basic version doesn't have. Connie won't be impressed by a basic puppet, so make sure you select the right one. Stamp the deluxe puppet in the scene with R2 or X. Get its feet roughly on the floor, but make sure they aren't intersecting with it. Then press the circle button to unequip the puppet from your imp. If you need to, you can grab and adjust the puppet with R2. In the next step, we'll start exploring the puppet's inner workings. The puppet might look simple, but it's quite a complex gadget. So let's get to know it a little better. It's made up of many objects that have been grouped together. And just like any other group, it can be scoped into. Hover over the puppet with your imp, press and hold L1, and then press X to scope in. Below the puppet, you will now see its base and its logic microchip. If they're obscured by the floor, you may need to scope out and adjust your puppet's position. The puppet's body is made of sculptures, joined together with connectors. When scoped in, we can grab parts of the puppet to change its pose. Before we do that, find the button called Puppet Mirror in the context menu. Select this button with X, and your puppet will stay symmetrical when you pose it. Of course, you don't have to make it symmetrical, but it's a good way to start. You can always add nuance later. When you move a part of the puppet, all the parts connected to it will also move. The root of the puppet is the pelvis, and every other part is connected in a hierarchy from there. For example, moving the upper arm will move the lower arm and the hand as well. But if you move the pelvis, the whole puppet will move. Its feet will try to stay in contact with the floor. So if you lower the pelvis, the puppet's knees will bend. You can also rotate parts by grabbing them with L2. Use R2 and L2 to create a new pose for the puppet. Changing the pose can be a great starting point for a character. The pose could be confident, sad, scared, or aggressive. Don't forget, you can undo any changes with the left directional button if you make a mistake. Use the grab cam to adjust your pose from different angles. Just hold R1 over the puppet to activate it. When you've finished posing your puppet, move on to the next step. Now we've posed our puppet, we can start adjusting its proportions. To do that, we're going to use the stretch tool. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Tools menu. Select the Stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The Stretch tool works like the Move tool in a lot of ways. But with the Stretch tool, you can move parts of the puppet beyond the limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Notice the way the neck elongates and shortens. Now try it on the hands. This changes the length of the upper and lower arm. Some body parts respond differently to the Stretch tool. For instance, limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Select the Stretch tool. It's the one that looks like a double-ended arrow. The Stretch tool works like the Move tool in a lot of ways. But with the Stretch tool, you can move parts of the puppet beyond the limits of the connectors. Try grabbing and moving the puppet's head. Notice the way the neck elongates and shortens. Now try it on the hands. This changes the length of the upper and lower arm. Some body parts respond differently to the Stretch tool. For instance, if you move the upper arms, the shoulders will broaden and the chest will expand. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons. I'd only recommend doing this to the puppet's extremities though, the head, hands and feet. Puppets are delicate contraptions. You can also scale parts of the puppet using the up and down directional buttons. I'd only recommend doing this to the puppet's extremities though, the head, hands and feet. Puppets are delicate contraptions, and extreme scaling and stretching can make them behave unexpectedly. But if anything does go skew-whiff, just undo it using the left directional button. If you know how to use Sculpt mode, you could try scoping into the individual body parts to change their shape. You can find a whole tutorial on sculpting in the art tutorials. Have a play around with stretching and scaling and see what you can create. Try making the puppet more cartoony or turn it into a monster. Test out your puppet in play mode to see it in motion. When you're done, return to edit mode. Rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. In the next step, I'll show you how to colour and stylize your puppet. Another way of customizing your puppet's appearance is by changing its color. We can do this by tinting it in coat mode. If you've played my tutorial on coat, style and effects, you'll already know how to do this. In the Assembly menu, go to the Modes menu and enter Coat Mode. In the Coat Mode menu, open the Colors menu and select a color for your puppet. Now hover over your puppet and hold R2 to tint it with your selected color. The longer you hold R2, the stronger the tint will become. If you want your puppet to be multicolored, simply scope into the puppet. Select a different color from the Colors menu. Hover your imp over a part of the puppet you want to tint. How about the head? Now, when you press and hold R2, just that part of the puppet will be tinted. You can also use the tools in Style mode and Effects mode. Try using Style mode to change the texture of your puppet. If you don't know how to use Style mode, there's an art tutorial which can help you. In the next step, we'll dive into the dressing up box. One of the simplest ways to customize a puppet is by adding accessories. But to make sure they move with the puppet, we need to group them with a body part. Before we do that, it's important to fully understand the concept of scoping in and out of groups and objects. If you've played part 4 of the Start Dreaming tutorials, then you'll already know a thing or two about using groups. Objects in dreams are often combined into groups, which can be treated like a single object in assembly mode. Groups themselves can also be grouped. This means that you can have groups nested inside other groups. Let's try scoping in and out of something else before we invade the puppet's personal space. Over there on the floor is a hat box. Make sure you're in edit mode. Now try taking the lid off the hat box. The whole box will move because the lid, the box, and its contents have been grouped. Undo the move with the left directional button to put it back in its place. Now scope into the group. Hover over the hat box, press and hold L1 and press X. Everything but the box should go grey and blurry. If not, make sure your visual feedback preference is set to all. This shows that you've scoped into the group and can edit its contents. Now, you should be able to take the lid off the hat box. Inside is another hat box. Try taking the lid off this one. I think you can guess what will happen. This groups themselves can also be grouped. Over there on the floor is a hat box. Make sure you're in edit mode. Now try taking the lid off the hat box. The whole box will move because the lid, the box, and its contents have been grouped. Undo the move with the left directional button to put it back in its place. Now scope into the group. Hover over the hat box, press and hold L1 and press X. Everything but the box should go grey and blurry. If not, make sure your visual feedback preference is set to all. This shows that you've scoped into the group and can edit its contents. Now, you should be able to take the lid off the hat box. Inside is another hat box. Try taking the lid off this one. I think you can guess what will happen. This smaller hat box is also grouped with its lid and contents. Remove the smaller box and place it next to the large one. Now scope into this group by holding L1 and pressing X over the smaller hat box. The original hat box will go grey and blurry as we've scoped into a subgroup. Now you should be able to open the smaller hat box. What's inside? A lovely hat! Take it out and place it next to the smaller box. When you've done that, proceed to the next step. Now that we've taken the hat out of the box, let's try putting it on our puppet. First, group inside your imp while holding the hat. Whilst holding an object, adds or removes it from that group. Hurrah! Whilst holding the hat. If you've done it correctly, you should be back in the main scene. With a hat you can now move independently of the boxes. That's because scoping in and out of a group whilst holding an object adds or removes it from that group. Now scope into the puppet's head while still holding the hat. This is a shortcut for grouping two objects if you're already grabbing one of them. Simply grab an object and scope into another object to group them automatically without having to select them. The same way that scoping into a group while holding an object adds it to the group. Now that it's in a group with the head, place the hat where you want it. Remember to check it from different angles using the grab cam to make sure it's in position. Press R2 softly to nudge if you need to make fine adjustments to the position of the hat. Before you move on, you should try out the puppet to see it walk around with its new accessory. Switch to play mode, possess it with R2, and take it for a wander. Nice. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Going to play mode and back to edit mode will scope you out of any groups. Remember to rewind time with L3 to get your puppet back in position. Then go to the next step. Okay, let's add some more accessories before our puppet's stage debut. Open the assembly menu and select Search, the button with the magnifying glass, to search for an element. Usually, you'd be in the Dreamiverse here, but for this... Okay, let's add some more accessories. Okay, let's add some more... Now that we've taken the hat out in your puppet. This is a shortcut for grouping two objects if you're already grabbing one of them. Simply grab an object and scope into another object to group them automatically without having to select them. The same way that scoping into a group while holding an object adds it to the group. Now that it's in a group with the head, place the hat where you want it. Remember to check it from different angles using the grab cam to make sure it's in position. Press R2 softly to nudge if you need to make fine adjustments to the position of the hat. Before you move on, you should try out the puppet to see it walk around with its new accessory. Switch to play mode, possess it with R2, and take it for a wander. Nice. When you're ready to continue, go back to edit mode. Going to play mode and back to edit mode will scope you out of any group. Okay, let's add some more accessories before our puppet's stage debut. Open the assembly menu and select Search, the button with the magnifying glass, to search for an element. Usually, you'd be in the Dreamiverse here, but for this tutorial, I've kept things simple and curated a collection of elements for you to use. Take a look at some of the accessories in the collection. Select one you like with X. You'll now have your chosen accessory on your imp. Don't stamp it down yet, though. First, we need to scope into the puppet. You can do this even when you have an element from the Dreamiverse on your imp. Scope in with L1 and X, and then scope into the body part that you want to attach it to. If that body part is already in its own group, you'll enter that group. But if the body part is just a sculpture, then you'll create a new group when you stamp the object down. Once the accessory is in the group, you can adjust the accessory while you're there. Try adding some more accessories from the collection. Then it's important to test the puppet in play mode to check that the accessory is attached correctly. Here's another very important tip. If you ever want to remove an accessory, whatever you do, don't ungroup the body part. If you do that, you'll delete that group's connection to the puppet. And without the connector, your puppet's limbs will start falling off when you go into play mode. And nobody wants that. Instead, scope into the group containing the body part and the accessory. Then either delete the accessory or grab it and scope out. If there's only one object left in the group, it'll automatically ungroup, and the connector will remain safely connected to the remaining object. Play around with the things you've learned in this tutorial and have fun making a character. When you're happy, select the star podium from the tutorial collection and stamp it down in the outline that we've put in the scene for you. Then head back into play mode, jump onto the podium and see what Connie thinks of your creation. When you're happy, select the star podium from the tutorial collection and stamp it down in the outline that we've put in the scene for you. Then head back into play mode, jump onto the podium and see what Connie thinks of your creation. In this tutorial, we'll master paint mode. Uh-oh. Looks like Connie's having a bad day. Cuthbert got a bit handy with the lawnmower and mucked up her garden. Sorry, Connie. Let's paint her a lovely new one in paint mode. So, to explain, everything you see in dreams is made up of little splats called flecks. They can be big, loose and painterly, or small, tight and smooth. In paint mode, we deal with strokes, like real-life painting. Strokes are lines of flecks that you draw in 3D space using your imp. Let's make some now. Go to the Assembly menu. If it's closed, just press the square button to open it. Then open the Modes menu with X. It's this little group of icons. In the Modes menu, select Paint Mode. It has an icon with a paint squiggle. When you enter Paint Mode, you'll go straight into the Flex menu, and the Brush Flex tool will be equipped to your imp. See? There's a fleck on the tip of your imp. When you're painting, everything else goes blurry and black and white to help you focus on what you're creating. You can adjust the visual feedback in your preferences, which you can find in the Options menu. Try pressing and holding R2 while you move your imp around. And look at that! You're painting. Your imp creates a paint stroke made of a trail of flecks. Try changing how hard you press R2 as you paint. With the Brush Fleck tool, changing the pressure on R2 affects how opaque the flecks are. So if you press R2 lightly, the flecks will be more transparent. Now press square to open the paint menu so that we can look at some new colours and finishes. Look at the top row of buttons in the paint menu to find them. As well as the Flex menu, which is already open, there are also menus for colours and finishes there. You can use these to change the colour and finish of your flecks. Practice with the Brush Flex tool and make as many strokes as you like. You can always undo any mistakes with the left directional button. Once you've got a feel for painting, continue to the next step. Was that fun? Now that you've made a gorgeous painting, hold L1 and press circle to scope out of paint mode. It's just like scoping out of a group and works the same way for all creation modes. A painting is a single object created in paint mode, just like a sculpture is a single object created in sculpt mode. In assembly mode, you can move, scale, and rotate your painting. To edit the strokes in the painting, you can scope into it, just like you can with a group. Try scoping into the painting you just made. Hover over it, hold L1, then press X to scope in. When you scope into a painting, you will automatically be put back into paint mode and equipped with the brush fleck tool. Press circle to unequip the brush fleck tool. Now you can use the move tool on the individual strokes in the painting. You can scope out of the painting again with L1 and circle. Do you fancy making some flowers for Connie's garden? Connie loves flowers. Let's start by making a leaf, and then we can work our way up to the petals. Delete your practice painting using triangle. Then enter paint mode in the Modes menu. Choose a colour and a finish from the paint menu. Then choose a fleck to paint with. Use the up and down directional buttons to adjust the size of the fleck. Now paint a simple stroke. Remember, the harder you press, the more opaque the flecks will be. If you want to take another shot at it, just undo with the left directional button and try again. When you're happy with your leaf, go to the next step. Next, let's paint a stalk. In the context menu, you'll see a button with a plus sign icon. Select this button to start a new painting. For the stalk, we'll use the Draw Flex tool. Open the paint menu with square if it's closed, then select the Tools menu. The Draw Flex tool icon is a pencil. Select it with X. Draw Flex acts more like a pen than a paintbrush. The harder you press R2, the larger the stroke gets. So if you press gently, the stroke will be quite small. When you scale the Draw Flex tool, the fleck will get much bigger. That's because it's showing you the maximum size of the fleck. When you stop scaling, it reverts back to the smallest size the fleck can be. Try drawing a flower stalk with it. Have a few goes to practice. Adjust the pressure on R2 as you paint the stroke, so that the stalk tapers at the end. Don't worry about lining it up with the leaf though. We'll do that later. When you're happy with your stalk, continue to the next step. Now the exciting bit, the flower. In the context menu, select the Start New Painting button. By starting a new painting, the flower will be a separate object to the stalk. We're going to paint the petals with the Stamp Flex tool, plus a special ingredient. You can find Stamp Flex in the Paint Mode Tools menu. Select it with X Then choose a fleck, colour and finish for your flower's petals. Now for that special ingredient, the Kaleidoscope Guide. You can find Kaleidoscope in the Guides menu, which is in the top row of the Paint menu. The Kaleidoscope icon looks like a snowflake. Select it with X to turn it on. Leave the settings as they are for now. You can experiment with them later. You'll now have a clump of 5 flecks on your imp. Stamp the clump in your scene. That will set the centre of the kaleidoscope. There will now be 1 fleck on your imp and 4 others floating around the centre point. Whatever you do with the fleck on your imp will be mirrored by the other 4. You might need to adjust your position to get a good view. You could also try rotating the fleck on your imp. To do that, hold L2 and use the sticks, or stroke the touchpad. You can use the up and down directional buttons to scale the flecks. Whatever you do, make a flower you like the look of. If you mess up, you can just undo it with the left directional button and try again. You've learned. Equip the Stamp Flex tool by pressing circle. Then use triangle to delete any parts you don't like. If you delete the first flecks you stamped, the Kaleidoscope Guide will still be centered on their position. With the Move tool equipped, you can also move or even clone parts of the painting. Flecks created with the Kaleidoscope Guide will always behave like a kaleidoscope, even when the guide is turned off. Now we've finished painting, unequip the Stamp Fleck tool with circle. And if it's still on, turn off Kaleidoscope in the Guides menu too. Scope out of the painting by holding L1 and pressing circle. Now you can assemble the parts of the flower using the Move tool. Beautiful. Let's group the flower so it's a single object. Select all of the flower parts with X. And now select the Group button in the Context menu. There! We've made the flower a single group that we can move, scale, rotate, and clone. I spy some charming plant pots. How about we put the flower in one of them? Now let's make another flower by cloning the first one. So hold L1, then grab the flower with R2 to make a clone. We don't want them all to look identical though. Let's make a different bloom. You can scope into the flower group by holding L1 and pressing X over it. Now delete the bloom from the top of the plant. Let's do something a bit different with this flower. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit the appearance of your flecks. So, let's make a beautiful new bloom for this flower. Enter Paint mode and equip the Stamp Flex tool. To make this bloom look a little different, we're going to edit the flecks appear in the Fleck editor, much the same way. Try has sliders for altering the appearance of the fleck. They look a bit different to the sliders you see in tweak menus, but they work much the same way. Try dragging them up and down using X and see what they do to the fleck on your imp. How exciting! The fade slider adds extra flecks that fade away near the edges, much the same way. Try drag has slide in the fleck. To make this bloom look a little different, we're going to edit the fleck's appearance. We can do that by selecting the Edit Fleck button in the context menu. Or use the shortcut. Hold L1 and press square to open the fleck editor. It's the same shortcut as opening a tweak menu. The fleck editor has sliders for altering the appearance of the fleck. They look a bit different to the sliders you see in tweak menus, but they work much the same way. Try dragging them up and down using X and see what they do to the fleck on your imp. How exciting! The fade slider adds extra flecks that fade away near the edges. The scatter slider adds extra flecks with impasto to create a more three-dimensional clump of flecks. The opacity slider makes the fleck more transparent. Once you've adjusted the sliders to your liking, simply press circle to exit the fleck editor and start painting with your fleck. Now create a new bloom for the flower. Perhaps try turning on Kaleidoscope again. When you're finished, exit the painting by pressing L1 and circle. Move the new bloom onto the stalk and then scope out of the group with L1 and circle. When you're done, move on to the next step. Now we have some new flowers, how about a bit of rain to water them? We can do that by creating an animated stroke. Make sure you're scoped out of any paintings or groups. Then select Paint Mode from the Modes menu. For the rain, we'll use the Rule Flex tool. It's in the Paint Mode Tools menu. The icon looks like a ruler. The Rule Flex tool lets you draw straight lines made of flecks. Choose a fleck, colour and finish for your rain. Something watery. Then close the menu with Square. These flecks are going to be raindrops, so make them small using the down directional button. Move your view back from the flowers so that you can see plenty of space above them. Then position your imp at a reasonable distance above the flowers and press and hold R2. Move your view back from the flowers so that you can see plenty of space above them. Then position your imp at a reasonable distance above the flowers and press and hold R2. Stretch the stroke down to the grass at a slight angle. Then release R2 to stamp it. This line of flecks is going to be the path of the raindrop. Unequip the Rule Flex tool with Circle. Then scope out of your painting using L1 and Circle. It doesn't look like much at the moment, but in the next step, I'll show you how to make it look. To animate the painting, we need to tweak it. So hover your imp over the painting you just made. Hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. Look for the animation page of the tweak menu. The tab has a clapperboard icon. The slider at the top controls the playback speed. Grab the slider with X and pull it to the right. You won't see anything change to start with. In order to see animation, you'll need to start time by clicking R3. Use the grab cam or the sticks to get up close to the stroke, and you'll see the flexor moving along it. You can increase the playback speed to make them move faster. The next step is to switch on pulse. When pulse is on, you won't see the whole stroke. Instead, a pulse of flex will travel down it. Select the pulse button in the animation tab of the tweak menu. Its icon is a bomb. Ah yes, that looks much more like a raindrop. You can shorten the trail of the pulse using the slider below the pulse button. Shorten the trail a little to achieve a raindrop look. The drops are still a little on the slow side. Grab the playback speed slider and turn it right up. That's more like it. One raindrop isn't going to water many flowers though. There's a handy way to duplicate your painting without having to clone it loads of times. I'll show you in the next step. So now let's duplicate our raindrop and create a proper downpour. In the tweak menu of the raindrop painting, look for the Duplicates tab. The Duplicates icon is a pair of sheep, just like the clone tool. This tab is used to create duplicates automatically, based on a variety of options. The positional duplicates options determine where the copies appear. The option we want is around camera. Select it and see what happens. Wow! Now it looks like it's really raining. This setting duplicates the painting around the camera automatically, so wherever we go in the scene, it will seem like it's raining. At the bottom of the Duplicates tab are 3 sliders. They affect how many of them there are, how far apart the duplicates are spaced, and whether they are scaled randomly. Try adjusting the sliders and see if you can create an effect you like. Then close the tweak menu using the close button in the corner, or hold L1 and press circle over the tweak menu to close it. Now that we've watered the garden, let's add some finishing touches. Open the assembly menu with square, then select the search button with X. The collection for this tutorial contains lots of great things made in paint mode. There are also more plant pots and a garden shed made in sculpt mode. Use the collection to finish making Connie's garden. Stamp some plants or pots, or paint more plants of your own. Make it lovely. When you're happy with the garden, stamp the shed in there somewhere. To finish the tutorial, switch over to play mode and walk Connie through the door of the shed. This tutorial is all about making music. Music can make your creations come alive, adding emotion and atmosphere. In Dreams, you can compose whole tracks from scratch and even make your own instruments. But you don't need to be a maestro to start making your own music. I'll show you how to create an arrangement using ready-made music clips. So let's begin. To start making music, we need to switch over to sound mode. Right now, you're in assembly mode. If you're ever unsure of what mode you're in, just hover over the icon in the top left corner to see your current mode and tool. Go to the Assembly menu and open the Modes menu with X. The Modes menu is where you access all the different creation modes. Each mode has its own set of tools and options. The button for Sound mode has a speaker symbol on it. Select it with X. Now you have a new menu at the top of the screen. This is the Sound menu. It contains everything you need to make your own music. In the scene, you'll see a timeline gadget. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit it. Music in Dreams is arranged in timelines. This timeline contains a version of the music you heard at the start of this tutorial. To see what's inside it, we need to open its canvas. Hover your imp over the timeline, hold L1 and press X to open it. It's just like scoping into a group. This is the timeline canvas. The canvas exists within scene space, so if you pull down on the left stick, you'll back away from it. Hold the L1 button and use the left stick to move up and down the timeline. This is the best way to navigate around timelines, especially when they're big. This piece of music is called Connie's theme. To listen to it, just start time by clicking R3. See how the piece is composed of many music clips. The clips power on and off as the playhead passes over them. Click R3 again to pause time. Each music clip is a collection of notes made by an instrument. You can grab them and move them around with your imp. If you want to delete a music clip, hover over it and press the triangle button. Clips can also be cloned by holding L1 when you grab them. You can extend the timeline by hovering over one of its edges and holding X. The edge glows and an arrow icon appears. You can also extend the bottom if you need space for more clips. Once you've finished listening to the piece, click L3 to rewind time. You can find all sorts of different music by searching the Dreamiverse. To add music to one of your scenes, you could simply stamp a ready-made timeline, like this one. But in this tutorial, you'll learn how to assemble your own track from ready-made music clips. Move on to the next step and we'll get started. So, let's start making music. It's actually a lot easier than you might think. Close the timeline by selecting the cross button in the top right corner. Or hover over it, hold L1 and press circle to close it. Now delete the timeline by hovering over it with your imp and pressing triangle. Let's add a new music timeline to the scene. Press square to open 2 or X. Open up the timeline canvas with L1 and X. This timeline is empty, ready to be filled with music. The columns on the timeline represent musical bars. This timeline is 8 bars long. We'll need more space than that, so hover over the right edge and grab it with X. Extend the timeline to 16 bars. Now let's add a music clip to the timeline. Press square to open the sound menu. Find the search button and select it with X. Its icon is the magnifying glass. When you search in sound mode, there are 4 options for finding different sounds. Select Search Music Clips with X. This is the Dreamiverse. Here you can find music made by other dream shapers. Well, usually you can, but for this tutorial, I've made a collection of elements for you to use. That's what this cluster is. Select it with X to open it. It contains a selection of music clips which you can use to build your own arrangements. Use the right stick to zoom in and out and the left stick to move around. I've grouped the clips into different categories. Let's start with a basic melody. That's this group of clips. Hover over the clips to hear a preview of how they sound. Find one that you like, then select it with X to equip it to your imp. I'm using the clip Nostalgia Bells. Your imp will now be holding a gadget containing your selected clip. If you hover over the timeline, the gadget should snap to the canvas and reveal the whole clip. Place the clip at the start of the timeline and stamp it with R2 or X. Clips on a timeline will snap to the bars and to other clips. This will help you line them up. Click R3 to listen to the timeline. In the next step, we'll build up the track with some more clips. Click L3 to rewind time. Let's build on the melody by adding some chords. Go to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips again. Over here are some chord clips. Hover over the clips to preview them, then select one with X. I'm going with Suspended Pad, but you can make your own choice. Stamp your clip onto a new row of the timeline and snap it to the start. Click R3 to listen and notice how the clips play together in time. Click L3 to rewind. Now let's add some drums. Go back to the sound menu and select Search Music Clips. Find the drum clips in the collection. A drum beat can really change the feel of a track. I love these samba practice drums. Pick a drum clip you like, then stamp it onto the timeline under the melody and chords. Now click R3 to listen to how it sounds. All the clips in the collection are in the same time and key, so you can mix and match them easily. Click L3 to rewind. In the next step, I'll show you how to edit the length of your clips and how to add fades. When you hover over a clip on the timeline, you'll see dotted lines light up at the start and at the end of the clip. Move closer to the timeline so you can see them properly. These are trim handles. We can use them to change the length of a clip. Hover over the handle on the end of the drum clip, then hold R2 to grab it. These clips are loops, so you can extend the clip beyond its original length. All the clips in the collection can be extended in this way. Trim handles are really useful for arranging and remixing. They let you use just a section of a clip without having to edit the music notes inside. On top of the trim handle, you'll see a little coloured gizmo. Move in closer to see it properly. This is a fade handle. You can use it to fade the volume of a clip in or out. It works just like the trim handle. Grab the gizmo with R2 and move your imp left or right to create a fade. Try adding a fade out on the chord clip so it drops off gradually. Drag it out further for a longer fade. Now click R3 to run time. Doesn't that sound cool? You may have noticed that the music stops as soon as the playhead reaches the end of the timeline. In the next step, I'll show you how to make your timeline loop. Now click. To make the track play constantly in the scene, we need to set the timeline to loop. We can do this in the Timeline's Tweak menu. Hover over a blank area of the timeline, hold L1 and press square to open its Tweak menu. In here, we can change the timeline settings. Find the playback mode section. There are 3 options. Once means a timeline will play once all the way through when it's powered on. Sustain means a timeline will pause when it's powered off, then resume once it's powered on. Loop means a timeline will play repeatedly while it's powered on. Hover over the loop icon and press X to change the playback mode. You can also change the playback speed in the Tweak menu. Hover over the playback speed slider and hold X to grab it. Now move your imp to the left or right to adjust the value. Click R3 to hear your adjustments live. You can also adjust the slider by hovering over it and pressing the up or down directional buttons. See how it sounds when it's slowed down or sped up a little. To close the Tweak menu, hover over it, hold L1 and press circle. You can also tweak music clips to make them loop. Just hover over them, hold L1 and press square to open their tweak menus. You can also change their volume and tempo. Be careful changing the tempo, as your clips could go out of time with the others. We've made a cool piece of music, but you can carry on adding more clips if you want to. Maybe you heard something in a tutorial collection that would sound awesome in your arrangement. Try trimming and looping tracks. See what you can come up with. If you need extra space, you can extend the timeline by grabbing the edges with X. All the clips we've used in this tutorial come from the Media Molecule Music Collection. The collection contains lots of music clips you can use, as well as some complete tracks. Look for it in the Dreamiverse next time you're making music in sound mode. Once you've finished, switch over to play mode and listen to your track in the scene. To end the tutorial, just press Options and select the Exit Creation button.
Hi there, I'm Richard Frank. I'm an artist and designer here at Media Molecule. In this Dreams Masterclass, I'm going to be showing you how I like to build environments using the wireless controller. I'll be sculpting, painting and assembling a game level, then finishing off with lighting and effects. I assume you know the tools pretty well, so there won't be too many detailed instructions. It's more about thought processes and techniques. I won't make anything too complex or stylized, so if you're making your own level, you can add your own style and detail. I'll also work as efficiently as possible, so I can build a nice large scene and leave room in my thermometer for characters, contraptions, logic, etc. And on top of all that, I'll be designing the level so it plays well and feels fun, as well as looking good. There's a big difference between a cool looking environment and one that's fun to play. The way I work allows me to refine the playability and the look of the level as I build and playtest it. This means I only need a rough idea of what I want before I start. I've created a collection of all the parts used in this scene, in case you'd rather just customize and assemble those. Feel free to just watch or follow along as you create your own level. Before you do anything else, play the level to see my finished product. When you finish playing, click the arrow on the video to go to the next step. Before I start sketching out the white box level, there are a couple of things I like to do. First, I usually switch on the floor guide in the guides menu. This helps me orient myself while I work. I then place a puppet in the scene, or whichever character the player will use, to give myself a scale reference. Now I'll start sketching out a 3D map of the level in sculpt mode. For this, I'm mostly focusing on the layout and usability, not so much on the look. They do have a relationship, of course, but to start with, I like to deal with them separately. If they're both great in their own right, then when you bring them together, they'll be awesome. At this stage, it's usually a good idea to have a plan of what you want to make. Maybe sketch out a map on paper or have an idea of the gameplay. I'm going to make a treasure hunt against the clock, set on a tropical island with a main path and lots of side paths to explore. It will have a start and end, and pass through 3 themed areas. I use the stamp or smear shape tool for sketching, with a shape which is about as wide as 5 times the height of the puppet. You can resize it a bit as you need to, but it's good to stay aware of the scale. Using the wireless controller, it's best to make your big movements viewed from the side. So I always position the camera side on to whatever I'm doing, to minimize having to move in and out of the screen. Also, I don't make my sculpt edits too large. Having them in manageable chunks will make them easier to remove piece by piece later. As I'm sketching, I imagine running through the environment as a player. How far off the main path can they go, and where is off limits? Every time I make a significant change, I go into play mode and playtest the scene. I put myself in the player's shoes as if I've never seen the game before. Can I see where I'm supposed to go next? Are there vantage points where I can get a good view of what's ahead? Is it too easy and boring, or too difficult and annoying to get from A to B? I don't want the player to backtrack, so I'll add some drop-downs where they can't go back. There are many other ways to do this, like gates that close or collapsing bridges if you want to get really fancy. Don't forget to add checkpoint gadgets to your finished level if you do use this technique. It's important to leave plenty of space for the props that I'll be adding later. I also like to add side paths that are more difficult to find so that I can hide pickups in them. I'm not worried about making it super detailed or polished at this stage. The beauty of this approach is that I can edit it as I go. I'm pretty happy with this white box level now, so when you're ready, let's move on to the next step. This landscape I've sketched out could be dressed up as any type of environment. Desert and rocks, snowy mountain, grassy hills, or even a surreal alien landscape. With the power of dreams, we can easily make any of these options a reality. When I'm making levels, I always do some visual research to use as reference and inspiration. A simple internet image search should be enough in most cases. In this case, I'm going to do a lush and rugged environment with rocks and foliage. I could add all that styling and dressing to our huge sketch sculpture, but that would take ages. Since I love being able to change things up as I work, I prefer to build a set of pieces to assemble the level from. That way I can easily edit the layout of the scene as I go along in a non-destructive way, and get to a larger and more presentable scene more quickly than if I handcraft this one massive piece. The Dreams engine makes it very easy to do this without any issues technically or visually. Once I've assembled the scene, I'll handcraft unique features to make it feel bespoke. I'll start by building large chunks to block out the space, then I'll assemble them, then I'll work on the smaller details. First, I'll make a basic lump of earth, which can be used as ground, wall, or platform. When you're ready to get started, go to the next step. Or visually. Once I've assembled and get to a larger work, I prefer to build as reference and inspiration. A simple internet image search should be enough in most cases. In this case, I'm going to do a lush and rugged environment with rocks and foliage. I could add all that styling and dressing to our huge sketch sculpture, but that would take ages. Since I love being able to change things up as I work, I prefer to build a set of pieces to assemble the level from. That way I can easily edit the layout of the scene as I go along in a non-destructive way, and get to a larger and more presentable scene more quickly than if I handcraft this one massive piece. The Dreams engine makes it very easy to do this without any issues technically or visually. Once I've assembled the scene, I'll handcraft unique features to make it feel bespoke. I'll start by building large chunks to block out the space, then I'll assemble them, then I'll work on the smaller details. First, I'll make a basic lump of earth, which can be used as ground, wall, or platform. When you're ready to get started, go to the next step. So, first I'll build my basic earthy building block. Later, I'll create variations of it, adding grass, rocks and things like that. I'll begin by creating a new sculpture. I want to use a shape about the size of the one we were sketching with before. Remember, that's about 5 times wider than the puppet is tall. I'll use a large hexagonal cylinder for an angular rocky look. I usually use the stamp tool as it's more efficient and I can soft blend it for organic forms. I'm also going to use a standard brown tumbler from the colour palette. Using standard colours helps with consistency, and the tumblers give a more natural look. It's a good idea to set the finish and fleck now too, although I can always change those later. You touch work but the top off with a large but works cliffs and walls, so I make them rugged but vertical enough that they can't be climbed. I want to create a rounded hexagonal shape at the top. Now it's time to add some finishing touches to this earthy build. Always add more blend. I save the sculpture as an element to my creations. Now that I've made the basic sculpture, I can clone it and customize it to create variants and then save those as nested elements. This means that if I update the basic one, I can update the customized one to pick up the changes I make. In the next step, we'll create some variants.
Dream surfing. Here we can explore the wilds of the Dreamiverse, slipping and sliding through the strangest and most wonderful ideas and creations. Lose yourself in the kaleidoscope of games, animations, music videos, and all sorts of worlds and experiences made by dreamers just like you. Dream surfing is a never-ending, ever-changing stream of dreamers' imaginations. Let's try it out. Welcome to Dream Surfing. Explore all that the Dreamiverse has to offer, organized into playlists to help you find what you like.
Hello? Oh.